United States Secretary of Defense Pete Hekset stopped arms deliveries to Ukraine despite military analysis indicating that the aid would not jeopardize United States combat readiness and that halting it was not recommended. This move stunned the State Department, Ukraine, European officials, and members of the United States Congress, who demanded explanations from the Pentagon. But the paradox is that Hekset's decision even shocked Donald Trump, who was not informed about it, as it was considered a routine matter. And today, after talking with Zelensky, Trump said in surprise, "Well, I'll check. What exactly did we even stop there?" But as it turned out, this is already the third time Hekset has unilaterally blocked military supplies to Ukraine. One of these episodes simply didn't become public, but it did happen. I'm Alexei Pechi. Today is July 4th. Let's discuss this together. So, the United States Department of Defense delayed the delivery of American weapons to Ukraine this week due to alleged concerns, according to officials, about low weapon stockpiles in Pentagon warehouses. But that was the main reason. The Pentagon assured that after auditing the weapon stockpiles, it allegedly turned out that after the operation in the Middle East, the American army is short on ammunition. Therefore, it is necessary to stop supplying weapons to Ukraine and redirect them to the needs of the American army. However, an analysis conducted by senior military officers rather than office officials from Pete Hekset's team showed that the aid package to Ukraine, which was halted, would not in any way jeopardize the American army's own ammunition supplies. They say this is just a made-up reason for stopping the supplies. According to numerous sources familiar with the situation, the decision to halt arms supplies caught the State Department, members of Congress, officials in Kyiv, and European allies by surprise. Among the critics of the decision were both Republicans and Democrats who support aid to Ukraine in its fight against Russia. The leading Democrat in the House of Representatives, Adam Smith, said that it was disingenuous of the Pentagon to use United States military readiness as a justification for stopping aid, when the real reason apparently was simply pursuing an agenda to stop American aid to Ukraine. Supposedly, the real reason is purely political and lies in the fact that Trump's team still believed they could persuade dictator Putin to end the war. And Moscow was precisely demanding to stop the supply of weapons to Ukraine. Next, I'll quote Adam Smith, who is not just a congressman but a member of the House Armed Services Committee. In terms of stockpiles, we are not at a lower level than we have been during the 3.5 years of the war in Ukraine. So, he says basically nothing has really changed. Smith said that his staff had seen the numbers and did not see any signs of a shortage that would justify suspending aid to Ukraine. And so, according to information from 3 congressional aides and a former Pentagon official familiar with the matter, the suspension of military aid deliveries to Ukraine was a unilateral decision by United States Secretary of Defense Pete Hekset. But that's not all. It turned out that this was already the third time Pete Hekset had unilaterally halted aid deliveries to Ukraine. And this already looks like outright sabotage. The fact is, every time Pete Hekset cancelled arms deliveries to Ukraine, his decisions were not justified by anything. And without much change, his decisions were overturned by the White House. Donald Trump stood up for Pete Hekset and the scandal was hushed up. It turned out that besides stopping arms deliveries in February, Hekset did the same thing in May. However, in May, they chose to swiftly conceal the scandal to avoid presenting the issue to the public. A high-ranking Pentagon official, Elbridge Colby, the Deputy Secretary of Defense for Policy, supported these actions. Colby has long advocated for reducing United States involvement in Ukraine, for a complete halt to military aid to Ukraine, and, as he says, for moving weapons and resources to the Pacific region to counter China. Lawmakers from both parties were disappointed that they were not notified in advance and are now examining whether the delay in delivery violated legislation requiring security assistance to Ukraine. In other words, there is a law that was passed back during Biden's administration and nevertheless it remains in effect. These lawmakers and some European allies tried to determine why the Pentagon gave the order to suspend and tried to get it reversed. The White House defended this decision, stating that it was the result of an ongoing analysis by the Department of Defense of United States assistance to allies and partners abroad, which began last month. It turned out that the review began after Hekset issued a memorandum instructing the Pentagon Joint Staff to conduct an inventory of all munitions. According to 3 officials familiar with the matter, the assessment showed that some stocks of precision munitions are reportedly at lower levels, but have not yet reached critical minimums. In other words, even the report requested by Hekset showed that there is no critical situation. And it certainly doesn't warrant him stopping arms supplies to Ukraine. Moreover, according to officials, the Joint Staff concluded that continuing to provide assistance to Ukraine would not reduce United States supplies below the required threshold needed to ensure combat readiness. And after all that, the Pentagon simply decided not to respond to the request to comment on the whole situation. Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell called the assessment a capabilities review during a briefing on Wednesday. Here is his quote: "We can't hand out weapons to everyone around the world. Part of our job is to provide the president with a framework he can use to assess how much ammunition we have and where we are sending it." This verification process is currently underway. And so Ukraine has appealed to Washington with urgent calls for additional air defense systems as Russia has intensified its bombardment of Ukrainian cities. And over the weekend, Russia launched its largest air attack in the 3 years of the full-scale war. Firing 60 missiles and 477 drones across the country, today Russia has again launched 550 missiles and drones at Ukraine. And this delayed delivery included dozens of interceptors. Patriot is a highly desired weapon for Ukraine, allowing it to shoot down ballistic missiles. Plus, there were 155mm artillery shells rockets, high-precision rocket systems, grenade launchers, anti-aircraft missiles, and air intercept missile air-to-air missiles for the fleet of F-16 fighter jets in Poland and other European countries. Some of the American weapons had already been loaded onto trucks, ready to head toward Kyiv to help the Ukrainian government repel Russian missile attacks and hold the line against ground forces in the east of the country. Then the military officers and officials responsible for the delivery received a message that the shipment was cancelled, and as a result, they simply had to stop those trucks. According to 3 United States officials, the arms shipment had been approved by the Biden administration, some of the weapons had been taken from American stockpiles, and the Pentagon had received funds to replenish those very stockpiles. And other munitions fall under a program that provides money to buy new weapons for Ukraine from American defense companies. That is, once again, not from Pentagon stockpiles. This weapon was not taken from American supplies. So here, the entire logic of the Pentagon just completely falls apart. The United States has been sending significant weapons shipments to Kyiv since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began in February 2022. American officials and commanders began to worry about the state of American ammunition, stockpiles, and other equipment. But, as it writes, the aid revealed the inadequacy of the defense industrial base to replenish these weapon stockpiles. In some cases, this put the Pentagon at a dangerously low level of certain munitions, including 155mm artillery shells, according to numerous United States officials and former military personnel. In a letter to President Donald Trump, Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, a Republican from Pennsylvania, requested an emergency briefing from the White House and the Department of Defense to review the decision to suspend urgent life-saving military aid to Ukraine. He claims that it would be possible to both maintain sufficient weapon supplies for the United States military and send weapons that Ukraine urgently needs. Dan Caldwell, a former senior Pentagon official, defended this pause, which was announced by Hekset and Elbridge Colby. Here's a quote from Dan Caldwell, but I'll say right away, it's a very strange one. "They put the safety and readiness of our own armed forces above satisfying the interests of the foreign policy establishment, which often seems to deny the real limitations faced by the United States armed forces." And this kind of reaction from Caldwell is very strange because, he was simply kicked out of the Pentagon after the scandal with Hekset, who was just leaking classified information in the Signal Messenger. And Hekset decided that it would be Caldwell who would be the scapegoat, and Caldwell was fired from Pit Hekset's team. Caldwell says, "Well done, Pit Hekset, you did it perfectly." Well, and as I already said, Hekset has already twice suspended aid to Ukraine without any visible coordination with lawmakers on Capitol Hill or even within the Trump administration. The first time in February, it caused a sharp reaction from the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Roger Viker, who called this move a rookie mistake. Back in February, Republicans excused Hekset's actions, attributing them to inexperience and being new to the situation. The next time, according to a Senate aide, was in early May, and in both cases the suspension of aid was lifted within a few days. But the second time, and especially now, the third time, it's already obvious that this isn't a rookie mistake, it's a deliberate policy. And here's Representative Michael McCall, a Republican from Texas. A staunch supporter of military aid to Ukraine, he stated that it's extremely important right now to show Russia that the United States supports Ukraine. Quote, "We cannot allow Putin to win. President Trump knows this now too, and that's exactly why he stands for peace. Now is the time to show Putin that we mean business. And that starts with making sure Ukraine has the weapons authorized by Congress to force Putin to come to the negotiating table." There's hope that after today's conversation between Trump and Zelensky, the situation will change. Especially after Trump's admission that he supposedly didn't fully know what was going on and didn't fully know that Pit Hekset had apparently stopped the arms deliveries and promised to look into the matter. In any case, I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like.